Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our guests on this webinar. I know we have all been attending a lot of webinars and a phenomenal number of webinars, to be honest, ever since the pandemic. But having said that, I hope you can understand and appreciate why we thought at Sanam S4 that we had to run this webinar today. As the first one in the series that we are going to be doing all of this month, focusing on the new National Education Policy 2020 that India finally tabled. So the policy has been tabled on July 29th, very much a historic occasion and a moment, because the much awaited policy was a refresh and the first one in the 21st century after 34 years. It's been widely welcomed and has been hailed as a step in the right direction. And more importantly, what delighted me when I went through the policy was that, at several places it talks of SDG 4, which is, the focus on quality education. And again, at Sanam S4, Sustainable Development Goals are prime area of focus for many of our institutions, and many of us in the management team, we fully endorse the pursuit of the SDGs by 2030 and are hoping that India will march towards those SDGs. So it was a delight to see SDG 4 being oft referenced in the document. And an important point to note is that the policy has taken a lifelong learning approach and has recommended embedding that in the society's warp and weft. So before I go into my opening remarks, I want to also warmly welcome Professor and Dr. Lina Vadiya, who has been a consultant to the Kasturi Rangan Committee and has kindly agreed to come on this panel and unpack the education policy for us. Dr. Vadiya has been a senior, she's the senior fellow at Observer Research Foundation, and she received her PhD in physics from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. She has been a researcher in several places in India and abroad, including ETH Zurich and CERN Institute in Switzerland, and IIT Bombay and CDAC in India. She has served in the corporate sector as Senior VP and CTO at Netcore Solutions Private Limited, a startup in the area of mobile value-added services. Since moving to ORF in 2010, Dr. Vadiya has been engaged in research and policy advocacy in the areas of education, renewable energy, public health, and sustainable agriculture, all areas very close to my heart. So, it was wonderful to kind of see this. The primary focus of her work has been on higher education and research in India. She has contributed to the preparation of India's draft National Education Policy 2019, both as a member of the Technical Secretariat to the Dr. Kasturi Rangan Committee and as a member of the drafting committee of the policy. So Dr. Vadiya, welcome. I would just kind of, take the audience and you through the structure of the next 55 minutes or so. I'll make opening remarks and then hand over to you to make your remarks on the NEP. And then we will spend about 30 minutes where I want to walk you through some of the key questions that that we have come up with having gone through the document. And I would request that the audience post their questions in the question box that is there on the right-hand side of the panel. And, Dr. Vadiya is very keen to take a lot of questions from all of you. Before we got into this discussion, she was telling me how important it is to convey to as wide an audience the spirit of this document and talk about this document so that as many people can kind of, understand the thinking of the committee as they went about drafting this seminal path-breaking document with respect to India's higher education. Having said that, one of the key things in the so far as this document is concerned, it seems to be kind of focused a lot on using higher education as the change agent to completely revamp how Indian education landscape looks on the whole. So fundamental changes have been recommended both at the school level and at the higher education level. And there is an emphasis on the role of teachers. As a daughter of a teacher, it really kind of warmed my heart when I was going through this document as to how often the document referenced about the importance of teachers and the role of teachers and how you train those teachers so that the future generations are better equipped to deal with an ever-evolving and ever-changing world. And interestingly, or rather serendipitously, it was I was privileged to listen to Prime Minister Modi this morning as he addressed the UGC conclave, and how it was quite heartwarming to hear how he gave his full support to the policy document, and he said that the NEP will be the tool to make India future ready and take India to development heights. PM Modi also talked specifically about the introduction of the entry and exit points at various levels at undergraduate education, reskilling and upskilling of India being a knowledge hub for the world. And the NEP, he said, that will be the enabling document that he hopes we will all use to push India forward on this very important agenda. An important comment from his speech, which resonated with me, was about starting to build the global citizenship of our youth rooted in Indian ethos. So I wanted to enumerate some of the key highlights of the NEP, which has a horizon till 2040. Dr. Vadiya will correct me if I'm mistaken in this. So first thing is, MHRD being renamed as Ministry of Education, which then, gives a very direct kind of message to the entire world as to where our priorities lie. So education is now front and center of everything that we are going to do. Second thing is that, the comment that I made earlier about change in education being led by higher education, and the main thrust is going to be about ending the fragmentation that we have seen over the years in our higher education space. And the guiding goals of the policy, of course, are access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. Obviously, in India, we cannot be seen to be doing anything without widening the access and also looking at the affordability equation. The three-language formula, I have already seen a lot of debate in the newspapers about the three-language formula, and something that I would definitely want to hear Dr. Vadiya speak about. The NEP does recommend all students study 3 languages in their schools, at least 2 native to India. Obviously, every time I read about one language dying out somewhere, I do feel a pang. So, and as Indians, most of us are polyglots, and may that continue. Of course, the 5+3+3+4 structure that is recommended for school education hopefully will end the high stakes board examinations for the future generations. And it was very interesting to note that there is no hard separation that is being envisaged between arts and sciences. So, the embracing of liberal arts education probably for the masses, which is very good to see. And hopefully that will break the silos between different areas of learning. So UG degrees being 3 and 4 years, that is of particular significance to many of the institutions from overseas that have kind of looked at India, and when they are assessing students for their grad programs, the 3-year degree could be a stumbling block. And, it was interesting to read that the document recommends that the 4-year multidisciplinary bachelor's would be the preferred kind of mode at the undergrad level. Academic bank of credits to digitally store credits is another kind of very important move and a step in the right direction. especially for institutions wanting to verify the qualifications of students that and also enabling the transfer of credits between institutions. The single regulator, the light but tight regulation that has been recommended under the Higher Education Commission of India, with governance, degree granting powers, and funding, and also the learning outcomes, all of them coming under this one giant body in the form of HECI. Establishment of National Research Foundation. Interestingly, post the rollout of the document, we have started hearing not just about study in India, but also stay in India. I wonder if COVID has got, is the reason behind that. And, NEP could have been rolled out earlier maybe, but, now is as good a time as any other. Especially with COVID raging all over the world and in India, there is demand for studying closer home. So all of these will open up opportunities for our students. Select top 100 universities being allowed to operate in India is has been kind of, this is an announcement that has been awaited for long, and already there are questions around how we are going to, select these 100 universities, and why not others outside of that. So that is going to be a healthy debate, I suppose. The acceptance of technology now being the backbone of how we deliver education, so in the form of a National Educational Technology Forum that is going to be created. And last but not the least, integration of vocational education into school and higher education. So, vocational has always been the child of a step child. So now, that coming into the, the front and center of our learning outcomes is quite interesting to see. And the last point that I wanted to bring to the attention of the audience is about the gross enrollment ratio, which is going to be increased from the current 26% to 50% by 2035. I think I have covered all of the key points that are of interest to our audience, and and even for us citizens of India in understanding how this is going to change the higher education landscape and also the school education landscape over the next 15 to 20 years. So I will stop there, Dr. Vadiya, and over to you. We would love to hear your opening remarks on the NEP. Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshmi. That was a beautiful summarization of what the NEP contains. So I was going to say that I actually would like to sign off on my opening remarks. I don't need to make opening remarks because you have done a brilliant job of telling us what the NEP contains. Maybe I'll just say one or two things that, for me, the opportunity to work in the NEP was about, analyzing what has gone wrong in Indian education so far, and then examining all possible solutions on how one might deal with it, and then coming up with a consistent set of solutions that might deal with it. This was really, in summary, what the Kasturirangan committee did over the period of a year and a half that they actually worked on the committee, on the policy, because the writing of the policy was frozen in October 2018, and the document had to be translated into some languages. It had to be prepared for print version and so on, and all that was finished in December 2018, and the thinking was that the government would accept it and release it, but I think it got a bit late in the sense the timing was off because the elections were coming, and so it got held up because of the elections. And then the day after the election results were announced, the Secretary of Higher Education Secretary of MHRD at that time, Mr. Subramaniam, actually arranged for the policy to be accepted by the government. And since then, which is 31st of May 2019, it's been with the government and going through a lot of back and forth within government about they were trying to understand, because then you see after the election, Minister Javadekar, who actually shepherded us through the policy, was replaced by Minister Pokhriyal, so he needed to come up to speed, and then two more secretaries in Government of India changed, so they needed to come up to speed, and everyone was asking why has this been done and why not this, and so every decision was re-examined, and so it's only as of now, and it's like you said that now is as good a time as any. I would have preferred that we didn't delay so long, but because I think every year we lose, our kids grow up and they lose opportunities. But yeah, so that's really all I wanted to say. And I just wanted to mention that this Ministry of Education getting renamed has an interesting connection to what I just said about ministers changing, secretaries changing, and so on. One of the big problems in India is coordination across ministries, across transfers of ministers and secretaries and so on. It takes 20 years to prepare a child, from age 3 till master's degree. And in our system, we don't have that continuity, and we still don't have it, right? And so I think the decision in 86, what was it? In the 80s, in Rajiv Gandhi government, to rename it Ministry of Human Resource Development, what they did was all ministries or all activities associated with preparing students, including Ministry of Youth and Culture, and so on, were all merged and converted into Ministry of Human Development. But over the years, slowly, Ministry of Culture moved out, Ministry of Youth Affairs moved out, sports moved out, and recently skill development got created. So really then, Ministry of HRD was really only about education. So that by itself is a very small step, but it is reflective of some of our biggest challenges. So I'll stop here. I think it's better if I sort of respond to questions from you or from the audience, because it's much more specific. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot to discuss.
So before we dive into the first question, I want to run a poll. So Joyce, could you run the first poll for us, please?
What do these polls do, Lakshmi?
Yeah, so we can.
Okay, pretty cool. 71% positive. That's not bad at all.
Yeah, not bad at all. Right.
And more important, I guess, is 3% negative. So I think we should make space to discuss the concerns of the people who have a negative vote.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Joyce, for that. Right. So, Dr. Vadiya, my first question to you is around the reforms. So according to you, what are the key reforms in the NEP that will bring about a transformative change in the Indian higher education space and also the Indian education system?
So yeah, I'm glad you modified that question, because I was just going to say that most of us are talking about higher education, but I think that the biggest change in the policy is the focus on our youngest children. We have, our education system was built on rather weak foundations, which is what we understood, and which all of us know, because year after year, Pratham comes out with the ASAR reports, which kind of have damning evidence of the fact that our children are not attaining foundational literacy and numeracy. So we went into that question and combined it with recent research in cognitive sciences and educational psychology and so on, and realized that where we need to put the maximum attention is in our youngest children. So 3-year-olds have been brought into the ambit of the policy. That's really the oldest age we can do that. And we are focusing very hard on early childhood care and education and foundational literacy and numeracy, because that strong foundation will allow us to build on everything else.
Right. When I was reading through the document, one thing that I saw was about the emphasis on outcomes, which is, I think, a change in our outlook, because India has always been so focused on inputs you do these many years and then you will do this, and suddenly now we have pivoted to this outcome. So I just wanted to understand if the committee really debated on this, because it is um, uh, a big change from how we have done our education so far.
Yeah, I mean, it was a matter of raging debate because nobody, agreeing on what do we mean by outcomes. Of course, there are lots of international metrics and so on there, but it's so the committee was always aware of the fact that even our focus on learning outcomes can be abused. I mean, not necessarily intentionally, but if too much focus on outcomes, you really need to focus on the child and has the child learn. But the outcomes we have made provisions for in several ways. Like one of them is the assessments that we have suggested, for example, at third grade, to estimate how many kids have actually attained foundational literacy and numeracy, and to see whether those kids who didn't achieve it by third grade, whether they achieve it 2 years later by fifth grade. Because if they have not attained foundational literacy and numeracy, everything else that we build on is actually not going to help. So the assessment surveys that we have built into at grade 3 and grade 5, and then later grade 8, readiness for secondary school, abstract concepts and so on, is very, very critical. And that was also the reason, those kinds of thinking was also the reason why we went into to split up the 10+2 into 5+3+3+4, because it ties in with latest scientific knowledge about how children learn, the transition from perceptual learning to conceptual learning to prescriptive learning to abstraction learning of abstract concepts. So we've tried to map it to that. But primarily the push is towards making sure that children attain foundational literacy and numeracy. Once that happens, the child, starts to blossom and express their interests, and the policy has made a framework that is flexible enough that the child can leverage it. But this level of foundational literacy and numeracy is up to the adults, and that's what we were very, very particular about.
Okay. So, I'm quite kind of, moving on from the, school education and the foundational literacy. Could you, please expand on the revised structures and lengths of the UG, PG programs? Specifically, the audience would be very keen to understand about the integrated bachelor's and master's programs, and, and the duration change.
Yeah. So I think the next big focus, if you ask me, post early childhood education and foundational literacy, was on liberal education, because we have the left brain and the right brain, and there are combinations of things that every child or every one of us is good at, and a liberal education allows that freedom to explore that. So the policy was very, very clear that we have to have break all the silos, and we have to do it not just at undergrad level, but at secondary level. But when we come to undergrad, even at the undergrad level, in order to fully explore a liberal education, 3 years is too short a timeline. You do need the 4th year, so that you also carry with you a major in which you have done some minimum level of courses, so that you have some expertise. You can't just leave as a jack of all trades. So the best practice everywhere in the world is a 4-year undergrad, and so the 4-year undergrad had to be brought in. But we in India are a very cost-conscious market, and we cannot afford to add costs to every parent. The cost is each year of study is a major cost for parents, especially post grade 12. So we decided that we should allow the 3-year bachelor's degree to continue, but state our preference for the 4-year degree. And over time, if many more institutions move towards offering the 4-year degree, that's fine with us. But for the foreseeable future, the 3-year must continue. Then coming to the master's degree, we say the most important characteristic of the master's degree is whether it's a 1 year or a 2 year, there isn't enough research in the master's degree. So we wanted to sort of force sort of more emphasis on research. And we said that, just keeping an MPhil degree for the research part, very few people taking it, very tiny enrollment, didn't make sense. So we wanted to keep the master's degrees for specialization in research. So change the focus of the master's degree towards research. And the 5-year integrated is already running in the country in several places. ISAs are a good example. So we wanted to allow also the 5-year master's degree to continue. But in order to increase the focus on research, we did several things. One is to say that if you did undergraduate research and you got an honors degree, you could go directly for a PhD program. Right. And that's incentivizing undergraduate research. And then if you did just a normal 4-year degree, then you only needed a 1-year master's research to be ready for a PhD program. So the thinking was really built around encouraging research and keeping as much flexibility as possible.
Right. Okay. And do you think, Dr. Vadiya, that the horizon, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, 15 to 20 years, and with all the when we are talking of some of the affiliating colleges soon to become autonomous colleges and so on, it's a long drawn out process. Do you think at some stage we will not have 3-year degrees in India and we will just focus on 4-year degrees? Or we will continue to have that because of the different entry and exit points that we have talked about in the document?
So we discussed this a lot, and most people felt that the 3-year undergrad degree will remain for the foreseeable future, because people would, a bachelor's degree is aspirational. And so the 3-year is the first level at which you will get a bachelor's degree. Otherwise you will get a diploma and so on, which are not sort of aspirational. So we think that the 3-year degree is aspirational and will continue because undergraduate education is not free. The policy has committed itself to free and compulsory education until grade 12, which is 18-year-olds. But beyond that, it's not free. It's priced, and in order to allow the most people who can afford it the least to be able to get a bachelor's degree, we think that the bachelor's degree will most likely continue. But this was just the discussion in the committee. I mean, it's not. It will play out in the coming years. We'll see how it plays out. But we think it will continue.
Yeah, I think with the over 1,000 universities now in India. And I read in the document about, the expectation that in every district there will be a higher education of learning. And the rate at which we want to kind of improve our gross enrollment ratio from 26 to 50% would mean that, there has to be mechanisms for all of those additional students coming into the ecosystem, which is a great thing. But educating them in institutions of higher learning would mean that the capacity expansion that we need to be doing is a massive undertaking ahead of us. That then kind of brings me to my next question, which is around the differentiation and of 4 different models of universities and colleges as suggested in the NEP. So research-intensive universities and teaching-intensive universities, multidisciplinary education, delivery, and research universities and autonomous degree granting colleges. So what differentiates all of this? What was kind of, what was the rationale that the committee had as you crafted this structure to finally kind of, amalgamate various different kinds of institutions that we have? It is so confusing for someone, even us citizens looking at it saying, okay, what is this? Deemed university, deemed to be university, central, state, it's so confusing. So what are the key differentiators between these four clusters? And then how do you think these autonomous colleges are expected to progress to be universities over this period of time?
So I'll begin with the definition of university in India. Only universities were allowed to grant degrees. So colleges are not allowed to grant degrees, right? By law in India. So colleges had to be either constituent colleges of universities or affiliated to universities. So, but in the meantime, we've had several very, very excellent colleges. So what this question that you asked about research university, teaching university, colleges, and these new multidisciplinary education and research universities, this is actually more a statement about where we are starting out today. As you know, after independence, one of the decisions that was taken was that research would be done in research institutes like the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research or the Indian Institute of Science or Tata Institute of Social Sciences and so on, which were sort of specially funded for research, which would run postgraduate programs, but not necessarily undergraduate programs. And then the universities, which would do the education. So this was essentially the German model, which was prevalent at that time. There was the American model in which universities had undergraduate education and research, and the German model where research institutes were separate from teaching universities. So that was the model that we started on, and now we are seeking to change that. We are seeking to have research institutions do undergraduate teaching, and have teaching universities do a lot of research. So a lot of the provisions in the policy are towards that. So that's why we call them research intensive universities because they can give degrees, research intensive because they're starting from a position of strength in research, building strength in teaching, and the other guys, all the universities, starting from a position of strength in teaching but building research capabilities, and colleges that are good enough and have the reputation that they need and the accreditation that they need to become independent degree granting institutions should become autonomous, and they can do teaching, they can do research. Ultimately, we would like teaching and research to go completely hand in hand, and so it's more a statement of where we are starting with. That leaves only the fourth multidisciplinary education and research universities that we suggested. The acronym is MERU, and most people didn't like it because there's a power company. But actually, MERU has a much more important meaning.
The mythology.
The idea was that whenever you propose a new type of institution, you need a pace-setting kind of institution. So, we had the IITs immediately after independence, but, in 2000, in the very early years of the UPA 1 government, they started ISERs, the Indian Institutes of Science Education and Research, where they did undergraduate science education combined with research. The only thing that they did not do, which maybe they ought, if you look back, they ought to have done, was convert it into multidisciplinary and introduce humanities too. Then we would not need a MERU, because we just want to have some pace-setting institutions set up, and we will see when the implementation plan comes about how many there will be and where they will be. We don't know that. But essentially, the goal really is to begin from wherever you are and move towards building strength in both teaching and research.
Okay. So, that takes me to my next question. So in terms of when it comes to implementation, what do you envisage are the kind of parliamentary approvals that are required to execute all of these proposed changes in the policy, particularly, as we are talking of this transition, which is highly emotive to the HECI and the setup of international universities in India. So I'm quite keen to hear your views.
So all of those, when regulations change, that is the prerogative of the parliament. When laws change, only parliament can pass laws. So if there is a Foreign Universities Act that needs to come, and it will need to come to specify that foreign universities can come to India for the first time, then it will have to be passed by Parliament. If you remember, in UPA government time, there was a Foreign Universities Bill, and
Yes.
it generated a lot of excitement, but it fizzled out for various reasons, but also because the clauses regarding whether universities would be able to
Taxation.
repatriate the funds that they generate were very contentious, and could not be agreed upon. I think the same battleground is ahead of us even now. Maybe a bit more favorable to allowing universities to repatriate their funds abroad, because we are seeing that so many Indians are going abroad and taking funds with them anyway. But I don't know. I mean, actually, it really depends. It's for Parliament to legislate. So until a foreign universities bill comes, a new foreign universities bill comes, and it becomes an act by having been passed by both houses of Parliament, there will not be complete clarity on what are the clauses under which foreign universities can come. This is true. Yeah. And the same thing is true about regulatory infrastructure, the regulatory infrastructure. So we know that the HECI bill is ready, actually. The Higher Education Commission of India, the government has been working on the bill in parallel. So the interim, between the time the policy was submitted and was being examined, the new regulatory proposal was accepted. So the bill is actually more or less ready for Parliament. So I think it will get introduced the next time Parliament meets. And it's supposed to replace the UGC. So whether they will decide to hold the HECI bill so that they can generate the bills for all the others, the funding, the autonomous bodies under HECI, which is the for funding, for accreditation, for standard setting, and so on, remains to be seen. But I know that I have seen some drafts of the HECI bill.
Okay. And, obviously amongst a lot of our partner institutions, there has been interest in knowing how these 100 are going to be determined. Are they going to be based on, I'm sure the committee would have had robust discussions around, the categorization of these 100, whether it is going to be based on some rankings. I mean, is there any insight that you can give us, Dr. Vadiya, on that?
So, the only thinking at that time was that we should consider. So, whenever we discuss foreign universities, the thinking always is that, are we ready to compete? Is our Indian system ready to compete? Okay. And it's unfair to expect our Indian system to compete with foreign universities when you have shackled them so much. Therefore, autonomy and some time for the institutions to kind of make use of the autonomy and kind of get moving and get ready to compete for good students and so on is always a consideration. That's one. The other was that, eventually this number is just a suggestive number from our part, from the committee point of view. When it comes to Parliament, this will be definitely an issue that is discussed. That is it, I mean, what is the basis on which we are allowing foreign universities to come? And we certainly don't want, fly-by-night operators to come and set up shop. So we will have to put some criterion down. And so we put a suggestive criterion down, but we knew even at that time that this is just an indicative thing. The real criteria will come when the bill is getting made and is debated in Parliament about, and some consensus is built at that time. So at that time, all of us who are in education will need to engage with the government to push it to whichever direction we want. These are the two considerations. Yeah.
Right. That then takes me to the next poll. Joyce, could you run the next poll, please, for us? Right. Thank you. Could you put the results out?
Yeah, I mean, 70% feel that all of the above will work, and that's completely right. This is the reason why we opened the door to foreign universities, because they will bring best practices, they will bring new ideas for curriculum, new types of courses, and of course, at the moment, the number of students going abroad to study is a very, very tiny sliver, because it's, as you said yourself in your opening remarks, that it's very, very expensive. But if good quality education were to come, parents are willing to spend. In India, parents are willing to, spend everything they have. I mean, even today, we were reading in the newspapers that mothers have sold their jewelry to buy a cell phone so that the child can access online classes. So parents are willing to spend every last penny they have on education. And it's important that they get good education, and therefore foreign universities will generate lateral pressure. So I'm glad that your audience agrees with me.
Great. So then the next question I have, I mean, I know we have spent some time talking about research intensive universities, multidisciplinary universities, and so on. And, Prime Minister Modi has been a great champion of Make in India. It is one of his, flagship initiatives. There is definitely another initiative that, we at SunMS4 would recommend, which is Research in India. So, that then takes me to the establishment of the National Research Foundation, which has been stated in this policy. So, what is not clear from the reading of the document is, how is NRF going to be funded? How is it going to disburse the funds? If it is kind of a recipient of any funds, because I could see that there is a statement there about it being a coordinating body. So, and also, did the committee envisage that institutions outside of India could collaborate with Indian institutions and access the NRF funds?
So to answer your last question first, I mean, we didn't think about the fact that international institutions may want to apply for NRF funds, but I don't see, if they are working with Indian institutions and working on India-specific problems, I don't see why they shouldn't be funded, but that is the prerogative of the NRF when it is set up. So, it's not for the policy to say, it's for the NRF, when it's set up, and the initial board, and, the thinking and the vision and so on. In terms of funding, it will begin with the government funding. Actually, India is one of those rare, not rare, among developed countries, the highest amount of percentage of funding generally comes from industry. But in India, the largest amount of funding for research still comes from government, actually. So we have said that government needs to increase funding in research. We spend about something like 0.7, upper limit is 0.7% of GDP, which is too small. And so we need to increase spending. So government will begin by funding the NRF. And over time, building linkages with industry and doing research of value to them is a stated goal. So over time, hopefully that will bring in money from industry. The third group of institutions that fund research in developing countries is the higher education institutions themselves. But that's because they have either corpus or surplus from fees, and we know about the legendary surpluses that universities like Harvard and Stanford and all have. I mean, not everybody has that much, but universities themselves spend on research, and that percentage is minuscule in India. So we will see how that grows, but for now, the initial corpus is going to come from government. And the model of running the NRF will most likely be the US National Science Foundation. The US National Science Foundation has been very successful for the United States, but also several other countries have apparently borrowed it and are seeing very good results. Countries in South America and other places. So we would like to learn their best practices and take it forward, was the discussion during our committee time. Now it's in the government's hands, so we'll see. But yeah, that's definitely a gold standard worldwide. The US NSF is a gold standard worldwide.
Okay. Um, Throughout the document, there has been several references to vocational education, and it was interesting to for me to read the statement that vocational education has not been considered as as of the prestige level equivalent to higher education, and we want to change it. Um, I am quite curious to kind of hear about the discussions in the committee around how you, because we have been going on and on about vocational education for the last, I would say, 15 years, trying to kind of bring that into the center stage and embed that into our education system. We have had the NSQF, we have looked at other models elsewhere like Germany, the UK, trying to see how we can kind of integrate that. So do you think with this stated goal in the policy, we are going to see some changes? Because it talks of kind of integrating it from class 6, if I'm not mistaken, at the school level, vocational education.
So, first up, I want to say that, everywhere in the world where GER is very high, developing countries, GER is very high, 80s, 70s, 80s, 90%. 70% of that enrollment comes from vocational education.
Right.
And we in India, at the time of the 12th plan, had less than 5% coming from vocational education. With the opening up of the Ministry of Skill Development and a lot of skilling, that number may have gone up, but not by very much. I would be willing to bet that it's something like less than 10%, maybe 9% or something like that. So it's really much too small. But here, this brings us to some of our fundamental societal problems that, we are very deeply, class divisions are there everywhere in the world, but we also have the caste divisions, which actually used to sort of trades were learned within families, and, there wasn't a formal infrastructure for teaching trades. You basically learned on the job from families and so on. And although, the very first reports, Kothari Commission report talks very eloquently about vocational education. It was mentioned in the 68 policy. It was mentioned in the 86 policy, and, but somehow the implementation did not go right. And I think what the main thing that didn't go right is that these children who went to either the ITIs or the polytechnics, so the ITIs were conceived as, they're more than 50 years old. They were, I think the first craftsman training school came in 1951 or some such thing, if I remember the dates correctly. They were for dropouts, Of course, now ITIs are for people who passed out 10th grade, 12th grade, and so on. But in the initial days, they were for dropouts. But if they finished their ITI training, there wasn't a pathway for them into higher education. And the same was true about polytechnics, that you finished your 10th standard, you got into a polytechnic, that's a technical school, but you didn't have any opportunities into higher education. So that was a huge omission which caused the damage. And then this perception that vocational education is only for those who are not good in academics, which was a very damning perception. So all of those combined together made this, gave us the situation where we had less than 5% vocationally trained. The other thing was that, we haven't invested enough in our school education either, school and higher education. So we don't have enough labs, we don't have enough opportunities for young people to learn by doing. And what we saw as an opportunity, what the committee saw as an opportunity, was to marry vocational education with school and higher education, because that would bring in the culture of learning by doing. It would bring in appreciation for skills. And this is why we said that every child must take some vocational course at a higher level of proficiency. That's a very, if you think about it, it's a very huge leap to take. The policy has done that. We are insisting that every child take it. That's to sort of engender respect for skills, actually, and that it's not just cerebral skills. People have different kinds of skills, and you need to respect that. So And then, of course, there will be workbenches set up, there will be connections with society and, with your nearby foundry or your nearby potter, anybody who's doing any specialized skill. The schools and colleges will have to sort of connect themselves to all of this in their neighborhood. And those are all very good things because it exposes children, it connects them to real life, it connects their education to real life around them, and it exposes them to opportunities. They'll get new ideas. And so it was many birds with one stone, really, this vocational education. Right. So we'd like to convince everybody that this is actually a good thing. And I mean, most people will agree that it's a good thing, but we have to see how it gets implemented.
Great. That brings an end to some of the questions that I had. I've got some very interesting questions from the audience, which I would like to take up. So okay. A question here is about, the various sections of the policy will require development of a range of new skills for academics in many ways. Example, course design, teaching and learning methodologies. How do you see these new skills being developed?
So this is a very big challenge. So we have everything. We have faculty out there who can rise to the occasion, but we also have faculty out there who are, rise to the occasion and do everything that was just mentioned in this question, design new questions. They're just raring to go. They're kind of hating the control system that, sort of gives them everything top down. But we also have faculty who haven't got enough training to do this. Yeah. And a very great example was online education that you saw happen during the pandemic. Yes. I mean, yes. So what we have is a formal teacher training program that National Mission on Teachers and Training, NMTT, which started many years ago in the UPA government, I think, but now it's been renamed Madan Mohan Malaviya Mission on Teachers and Teacher Training. So that mission can probably be expanded to grow a lot. But I think that top-down efforts at training teachers won't work as well as institutions themselves figuring out, using their senior teachers, expert teachers, retired teachers, or experts in their community to train their own teachers. That would be really the best way to do it. And we hope that all ways are adopted, because we are going to need all ways to train teachers quickly. Okay. But we also think that teachers will respond, because they are the ones standing across from the children, looking at these bright-eyed kids, asking the kids asking questions. So they'll, we think that if we give them the freedom, they will respond to it.
Yeah, I mean, the way some of the school teachers have responded to the pandemic, and the effort that they are putting into educate our children, it really sometimes it moves me to see all these photographs being published in newspapers. And I have got friends who have partners who are teachers, and and one of them told me, I don't have access to my laptop half of the day because my wife teaches from morning 8 a.m. till 12 p.m. on the laptop, so it's for her students and her, so, and I mean, not that any of these teachers ever had, this is a black swan event for the entire world, and nobody would have thought that they would have to do this. And especially for our rural population, where teachers have had to call up and give lessons on telephone lines. I mean, honest to God, our teachers are, probably our greatest assets, and they really need help, if you ask me. And so hence, it's quite heartwarming to see that the document has put a real emphasis on teacher training programs and how we roll that out across the country. I have a question here from one of the audience members asking, so there are already children in the 10+2 format. So with this new structure that we are looking at in terms of our school education, do you think this is going to be in place from now, or those who are already in the system, how are we going to kind of bucket them into these? Or are we going to teach them out and then kind of the new ones that we enroll will go into this?
So before I come to this answer, I just want to, before we go off the topic of teachers, I just wanted to say that the policy document doesn't just emphasize on teacher training. It has looked at the entire, about last teachers in their entirety, their, their terms of work, their, continuous professional development, their recruitment policies and, career pathways and so on. And so we're trying to bring back the respect and the the excitement about teaching as a career, and we really hope that takes off, because it's the teachers who own the relationships with the children. And we can never forget that, no matter how many regulators or government officials or policymakers or anybody steps in, it's the teachers who own the relationship with the children. And that has been brought home to us in the pandemic, because it's the teachers who are reaching out to the children, and who the children are reaching out to, because it's like their lifeline when things are going wrong. So I think teachers are a very important aspect of success of this policy implementation. Now, moving on to the question about 10 plus 2 going into 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. This is the pedagogical restructuring. So first of all, it doesn't have to align with physical classrooms. So we've had questions saying that, oh, this school has only grades 1 to 4. What are they supposed to do? That one has only up till grade 8. What are they supposed to do? No, this is a pedagogical restructuring, keeping in mind the child's development, what kind of pedagogies they are ready for. And therefore, there is no reason why we cannot start it as soon as possible. But there are two things that we will wait for. One is that the National Curricular Framework for Teacher Education and the National Curricular Framework for School Education, both of these, the government has already begun work on it before they released the policy. So we think that the teacher education framework will come first in 1 year, next year sometime. And then following that will come the curricular framework. Ideally, after the school curricular framework comes, there can be a suggestive curriculum which will come from the NCERT, but we think that teachers should get a lot of freedom to adapt curriculum, so long as they are within the curricular framework, to adapt curriculum to local context and culture, and to their teaching styles and all of that stuff. So we'll see how that plays out. But we are looking at timelines of at least 2 to 3 years before the new curricular framework comes. But I have to say, I don't know if some of your audience has read the National Curricular Framework 2005. It's a fantastic, beautiful document, and it has the ability to take us
forward
till the new curricular framework comes. So
right,
we're okay with that. Everybody needs to plan and get ready for how we change, and that may take a year or two, but I don't think many things will stand in the way of changing the framework for education.
So the last question of this session, because we have just 2 minutes left, is about twinning arrangements. So, up till now, twinning arrangements have been allowed in India, but, in terms of the transnational education models that the committee has envisaged, did the committee look at other countries? And, like you said, the National Science Foundation is the model that we want to follow for NRF. Are there other countries that we looked at for our TNE in India?
No, I mean, we did a little bit of homework, because so everyone, I'm not that familiar with that aspect of it, because I didn't do the spade work for the internationalization part myself. But I happen to know that the focus of internationalization naturally for any government was, we know that students want to come and study in India. What is it that we can do to make it more attractive? That was one aspect. And then naturally the second one was that a lot of students are going away. What is it that they're going for? How can we enable them to stay? Or how can we, even if we allow these students to go with their just 300,000, not a very large number compared to 37 million current enrollment, and another 37 million that has to come in to double the GER. So it's not, but how can we allow the next tranche of students to stay in India and get a similar high quality education? So the specific mechanisms, although we discussed it with people and we learned from them. So our model of understanding what the problems and solutions was to consult people. So we've consulted a lot of people even on internationalization. So we got a lot of written inputs, we got a lot of verbal inputs. Although we consulted them and we understood some of the models, we didn't try to do an exhaustive thing. But twinning was discussed it's already running in private sector, private unaided education in India. For example, in India, higher education in India is private. Let's just be clear about that. 80% of the institutions, 78%, and 69% of the enrollment. So, private educational institutions have started already many models of international collaborations. So, of course, they are constrained by the fact that they can't give dual degrees and all those kinds of regulatory cholesterol which will get removed. But most of those models which are working well will get examined and get incorporated into the foreign universities or internationalization related bills that come to Parliament, I think.
Right, okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Vadiya, for that very insightful discussion. You've learned, I have learned a fair bit. And I think when I go back to the document, many of these comments that you have made will make a lot more sense. I am hoping that, as a result, what you said about the regulatory cholesterol being taken out of the system, hoping that the national education policy will form the bedrock of, India having a very highly adaptable and flexible education system that is fit for purpose for the 21st century and beyond, and helping the next generation of 37 million additional learners who are going to come into the system if we manage to push our GER to 50%. Is quite exciting and quite daunting, in fact. When I think of the numbers, it's quite mind-boggling. But having said that, anything is possible in India. And on that note, I wanted to kind of thank you very much for agreeing to do this discussion with us. And thank you to all of our attendees who have stayed on and listened. Many of your questions I couldn't take, but we will make a note of that and we'll get Dr. Vadiya's input and circulate her thoughts on the same. I also wanted to kind of leave you with a note that on 12th of August, all of this month, we are running several sessions on the national education policy, and on the 12th of August at 5 p.m. India time, we are focusing on the reform of the higher education as envisaged in the NEP, and we have a very senior academic coming on that, and you will have the details soon in your inbox. Please do attend. Thank you all very much for taking the time out at the beginning or end of your day, as the case may be, to listen to us, and have a very good weekend, and see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi. I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye-bye.
Bye.